I knew it was over the moment Amber Holloway refused to make direct eye contact with me. That 34-year-old venture capital appointee sat across from me in TechFlow Dynamics' top-floor glass conference room, like I was an obsolete equipment line item on a quarterly balance sheet waiting for immediate liquidation. She wore a bespoke designer blazer that radiated modern corporate authority and smelled faintly of expensive lavender perfume mixed with unearned structural arrogance. My name is Richard Miller. I am 54 years old, and I had spent 28 consecutive years inside this building writing every single line of defense-grade encryption architecture that allowed this enterprise to secure multi-million-dollar military contracts with the federal government. Now, I was being restructured right out the front entrance. Her opening statement was neither a courteous greeting nor an expression of genuine gratitude for nearly 3 decades of dedicated technical service. Instead, she tapped her imported fountain pen against her leather notebook and began reciting cold corporate buzzwords about organizational agility, overhead optimization, and strategic realignment. I had spent my entire adult life designing low-level assembly language protocols and military-grade communication safeguards that protected tactical field networks for national security agencies across the globe. Every cryptographic handshake, every mathematical key exchange, and every fault-tolerant data routing layer had been crafted under my personal supervision. Yet this young executive, fresh off a venture capital board appointment, was treating my extensive career like excess financial baggage that needed to be pruned before the next fiscal quarter. She opened my annual performance evaluation folder with 2 manicured fingers, glancing over 28 years of spotless reviews as if she were scanning a disposable takeaway menu. She told me that while my legacy contributions during the company's early development phases were acknowledged, TechFlow needed forward-thinking leaders who embraced rapid paradigm shifts and scalable cloud integration models. She flashed a cold, bloodless smile that completely failed to alter the hard expression in her dark eyes. She stated calmly that if I felt unable to adapt to the new corporate vision, the door was right there. Amber Holloway had never written a single functional block of software code in her entire life. She possessed a master's degree in business administration from a prestigious university and an influential father with extensive venture capital connections across Wall Street. A profound, icy calm settled over my chest as I listened to her hollow speech. I turned my head slightly to look through the floor-to-ceiling glass wall at the open-plan office layout. I could see the original server racks glowing inside the central data room, and the framed photograph resting on my desk showing our initial team of 7 founding engineers. Half of those senior developers had been personally recruited and trained by me straight out of university computer science programs. I recalled staying awake for 72 continuous hours during critical military deployment failures back when we operated out of a drafty warehouse in Arlington, living on lukewarm diner coffee and stale gas station snacks. I remembered missing my daughter's secondary school graduation ceremony because our main defense server cluster went offline during an urgent military exercise in 2012. I had stood before previous executive boards and fought relentlessly to protect my team's salaries whenever economic downturns threatened their family livelihoods. Now, this corporate climber was handing me a standardized termination notice, wrapped in patronizing human resources terminology. I closed my workstation laptop smoothly without creating a sound. I offered no dramatic counter-arguments, raised no voice in anger, and made no desperate pleas for executive reconsideration. I stood up calmly, placed the thick blue termination folder under my left arm, and adjusted my gray jacket. I walked out of the glass conference room with steady, deliberate steps. As I walked past the long row of open cubicles, my junior colleagues kept their eyes glued to their monitors, pretending to be deeply engaged in complex code reviews while maintaining absolute silence. I walked past the glass office of the human resources director, who had once asked me to personally mentor her nephew when he joined the software department. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody raised a hand in farewell. That heavy, suffocating silence carried the weight of complete institutional betrayal, instantly dissolving decades of professional loyalty, shared sacrifices, and corporate history. However, corporate executives like Amber Holloway routinely fail to comprehend how seasoned software architects process hostile situations. When an experienced engineer encounters a critical system breach, he does not panic or scream. He isolates the vulnerability, reviews the underlying system schematics, and prepares an appropriate structural countermeasure. Silence is not resignation. Silence is structured tactical execution. I did not drive directly back to my suburban home. Instead, I walked 3 blocks down the rain-slicked pavement to Murphy's Diner, a quiet neighborhood establishment that had stood on the corner since the late 90s. I slid into a faded red vinyl booth near the back window and ordered a large mug of black coffee. The diner was quiet, filled with the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee beans, sizzling bacon, and hot griddles. I sat in silence for a long time, allowing my pulse to stabilize as I processed the full reality of my corporate separation. TechFlow Dynamics had represented my entire professional existence. I had joined the firm when it was a struggling 20-person outfit operating out of a renovated industrial space in Virginia, back when defense technology firms were managed by retired military officers and technical experts who valued system stability over short-term stock valuation tricks. I had watched our enterprise expand from modest municipal contracts into a $750 million defense contractor servicing national security agencies. Every foundational cryptographic library, every secure routing protocol, and every core database wrapper contained my personal structural signatures deeply embedded within the binary architecture. I had never documented every internal nuance in standardized corporate manuals because the core logic lived inside my mind, refined over decades of late-night technical revisions and high-pressure military field trials. I paid the diner bill with paper currency, stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, and flagged a traditional yellow taxicab rather than using a mobile rideshare application. When I arrived at my residence, the house was silent except for the rhythmic clicking of dog paws against the hardwood floor. Major, my 9-year-old German shepherd, walked over from his corner bed to press his head against my knee, his dark eyes observing me with quiet vigilance. Animals possess an immediate awareness when something fundamental has altered in their handler's environment. I set the blue termination folder on the kitchen counter, poured 3 fingers of neat scotch into a crystal tumbler, and walked into my private study. I unlocked a heavy iron filing cabinet tucked inside the study closet, pulling out a drawer that had remained sealed for several years. Beneath stacks of historical tax filings, expired property deeds, and obsolete technical manuals sat a thick manila envelope sealed with heavy red notary stamps. Inside rested the original notarized provisional patent application for our primary defense encryption engine. My name was prominently printed at the top as the sole individual inventor, completely separate from TechFlow Dynamics. The application had been formally executed on August 15, 2008, during one of TechFlow's chaotic early corporate restructurings. When upper management was consumed with preventing immediate bankruptcy rather than auditing intellectual property registers, my longtime legal advisor and Navy veteran friend Walter Finch had given me crucial counsel during that uncertain period 16 years ago. Sitting at an Arlington tavern over cold beverages, Walter had strongly recommended that I hold the underlying provisional patent rights under my personal name until the company stabilized and executed a comprehensive corporate buyout agreement. He had warned me that early-stage technology startups frequently alter their leadership structures and betray their original technical founders once profitability arrives. TechFlow had been licensing my personal encryption logic ever since that period. Corporate legal teams had drafted temporary commercial licensing frameworks that contained very specific operational conditions. Buried deep within the contractual fine print under federal contract standards was a clear, unyielding reversion clause. In the event that the inventor suffered involuntary termination without cause, full exclusive right, title, and interest in the patent core would automatically revert to the individual inventor within 24 hours of formal dismissal notice. For 16 years, No corporate executive or legal staff member at TechFlow had ever audited that foundational agreement because everyone treated me as a permanent, immovable fixture of the company's technical infrastructure. They viewed me as the dependable old engineer who would keep the defense servers running quietly while executive officers collected quarterly bonuses. Amber Holloway had just pulled the pin on a legal grenade, completely unaware that she was standing directly over the blast radius. Working inside defense technology development for 28 years teaches a man to view every complex system through the lens of structural redundancy, risk management, and legal strategy. You never react with emotional volatility or impulsive public outbursts. You methodically evaluate your operational terrain, secure your primary intellectual assets, and execute your strategy with surgical precision. Sitting at my mahogany desk while Major rested his heavy head across my leather boots, I carefully reread every paragraph of the 2008 patent reversion contract under the warm glow of my desk lamp. The contractual text was absolute, leaving no room for corporate ambiguity or administrative reinterpretation. My mobile phone vibrated continuously on the desk's surface, lighting up with incoming text messages from former engineering team members who were attempting to process my abrupt departure. They expressed profound shock, sending polite messages offering sympathy and asking if I needed assistance navigating my professional transition. Human Resources had also dispatched an automated exit interview link, requesting that I complete a 5-point survey regarding my experience with corporate separation. I ignored every single notification, leaving the digital screen completely dark. Let them deliberate in uncertainty. Not a single manager had raised a voice in my defense when Amber Holloway handed me that termination folder in front of the department. What Amber Holloway and her arrogant executive committee failed to grasp was that I was not a disposable senior staff member, leaving behind a box of personal office supplies. I was the master architect walking away from a massive digital fortress to which I still held the exclusive legal deed. Those foundational encryption schematics were about to become astronomically expensive for TechFlow Dynamics. I stood up, walked into my inner study, and unlocked a fireproof steel safe embedded within the brick wall. I retrieved the original certified filing documentation for patent number 8,472,639. The documents were in immaculate condition, carrying the official embossed seals of the United States Patent and Trademark Office from 2008. At 5:30 in the morning, I dialed the private unlisted number of Walter Finch. Walter answered on the very first ring, his voice remaining sharp, alert, and methodical, despite the early morning hour. I asked Walter to review the enforceable status of the automatic reversion clause under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 261. Walter accessed his encrypted legal archives while staying on the secure line, reviewing the precise contract language of our original 2008 filing. He confirmed that because TechFlow's legal department had repeatedly deferred executing the final corporate transfer paperwork to save on capital expenditure, the original contract terms remained fully active under federal contract law. He explicitly verified that because my employment was terminated involuntarily and without cause on Monday afternoon, the automatic 24-hour reversion window was actively ticking and would mature precisely at 4:15 on Tuesday afternoon. Walter stated with absolute authority that the total exclusive ownership of the core encryption engine would revert back to my personal legal possession upon the stroke of that exact deadline. I thanked Walter for his expert guidance, ended the call, and opened my primary technical workstation. The 24-hour legal deadline was not an abstract legal concept. It was a live operational countdown. By 6:30 in the morning, I logged directly into the United States Patent and Trademark Office electronic filing portal using my verified personal inventor credentials. The electronic reversion process was remarkably straightforward. I selected the official portal section for contract condition satisfaction, attached high-resolution digital scans of the notarized 2008 agreement, and checked the mandatory box declaring involuntary termination without cause. I executed my digital signature, entered the double-factor authorization credentials, and submitted the formal modification package to the Federal Patent Registry. With that single calculated submission, absolute legal control of TechFlow's core technical crown jewel, the proprietary encryption logic that supported their entire $750 million defense portfolio, transferred out of corporate hands and directly back into my personal legal ownership. I did not indulge in dramatic gestures or emotional celebrations. I simply closed the web browser, finished my coffee, and refilled Major's food dish in the kitchen. By 7:45 in the morning, an official automated confirmation notice arrived in my personal email inbox from the Federal Patent Registry Office. Patent number 8,472,639 had been updated across all public government databases. Legal ownership was now formally registered exclusively to Richard Miller. Unless TechFlow's technical team had miraculously engineered an entirely new defense-grade encryption framework overnight, which was a physical impossibility. Every military communications system running their software was now operating without a valid commercial license. I opened a blank document editor and began constructing a comprehensive legal licensing framework. I had zero interest in engaging in prolonged courtroom litigation or public smear campaigns. This was a straightforward matter of commercial leverage. My non-negotiable terms were fully detailed: a $15 million upfront retrospective licensing fee, an ongoing 12% gross royalty on all active defense deployments, a voting seat on TechFlow's board of directors as chief technology advisor, full public attribution of original patent authorship, and the immediate termination of Amber Holloway for gross failure of corporate fiduciary responsibility. Revenge within the modern technological sector does not require loud public confrontations or emotional arguments. It requires bulletproof legal leverage, absolute composure, and an unyielding structural foundation. Across the city, TechFlow's executive board was likely gathering in their plush conference room for their morning coffee, completely unaware that the underlying technical foundation of their corporate empire had just been legally removed from underneath their feet. Technical information propagates with extraordinary speed within specialized software engineering communities, especially when an enterprise relies on legacy infrastructure designed by a single architect for nearly 3 decades. By 9:30 that morning, Amber Holloway had convened a mandatory all-hands strategic alignment meeting in TechFlow's main auditorium. According to detailed reports from senior staff members, she stood before a massive interactive LED display projecting extreme corporate confidence, speaking enthusiastically about streamlined operational models, overhead optimization, and aggressive fourth-quarter revenue projections. She proudly announced to the assembled staff that TechFlow's flagship, next-generation secure communications platform would be demonstrated live to senior procurement officials from the Department of Defense on Wednesday morning. Every critical subroutine within that software suite relied entirely on the foundational encryption architecture I had constructed 16 years prior. Not a single executive sitting in that executive row had bothered to perform a standard intellectual property audit before organizing the high-stakes presentation. At 11:30 in the morning, my personal mobile device rang. The screen displayed the name of Paul Jenkins, our senior lead software engineer. Paul had worked directly under my technical supervision for 9 years and regularly sought my assistance when resolving complex architectural bugs. I answered the call with a calm, measured greeting. Paul sounded visibly stressed, explaining that executive management was putting intense pressure on the engineering team to integrate my legacy cryptographic libraries into the final demonstration build. He confessed that the deployment automation scripts were throwing unexpected security authorization exceptions, and asked if I could spend a few minutes explaining certain undocumented initialization parameters. I listened to his frantic explanation in complete silence before replying that I no longer possessed legal or technical authorization to consult on TechFlow software systems, politely wishing him good luck with the upcoming presentation. Paul hesitated on the line, sensing the impenetrable wall in my tone, but I ended the call before he could ask further questions. Let their internal management team uncover the operational reality through proper corporate channels. By 12 o'clock noon, the official electronic notification from the Patent Office arrived in TechFlow's primary corporate legal inbox. However, large corporate structures routinely channel incoming regulatory correspondence through entry-level staff. A junior intellectual property analyst named Timothy was tasked with processing routine database updates. Timothy executed standard automated queries against TechFlow's registered intellectual property portfolio and was stunned to discover that patent number 8,472,639 had been updated to display Richard Miller as sole legal owner. Timothy immediately printed the verification record and ran to the office of the senior corporate counsel. The legal team immediately retrieved the archived 2008 contract, located the explicit reversion clause, and instantly recognized their catastrophic corporate exposure. Under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 271, deploying or demonstrating patented software architecture without a valid commercial license constitutes direct federal patent infringement. Furthermore, proceeding with a public commercial demonstration after receiving formal regulatory notice elevates the violation to willful infringement, exposing the enterprise to treble damages under Section 284. When the senior legal team presented these critical findings to Amber Holloway in her office, she dismissed their legal analysis with condescending impatience. She insisted that the database update was merely a minor administrative error caused by outdated filing records and instructed the attorneys to resolve the matter quietly after the Pentagon presentation concluded. She flatly refused to modify the event schedule, accusing the legal staff of panicking over routine regulatory paperwork. Amber's reckless posture was driven by a hidden vulnerability. She had deliberately concealed my termination from the board of directors, reporting my departure as a voluntary resignation to avoid board scrutiny regarding executive turnover. If she canceled the high-profile defense presentation, the board would initiate an immediate investigation into operational readiness and executive decision-making. Meanwhile, the software engineering staff continued compiling the demonstration build, completely unaware that every line of code executing on their staging servers represented an unauthorized usage of my personal property. The legal team quietly drafted an emergency risk assessment memo strongly recommending the immediate suspension of the demonstration, but Amber locked the document inside her private email queue. The clock kept ticking toward the public presentation without interruption. At 6:35 on Wednesday morning, my home phone rang again. The caller display identified General Bradley Lawson, retired United States Army commander and founding chairman of TechFlow Dynamics. General Lawson had stepped down from active management 8 years prior to reside on his ranch in Montana, but he retained substantial corporate equity and immense respect across the defense technology sector. General Lawson bypassed all polite formalities. He stated that he had just received an automated legal compliance alert from his military advisory network, indicating that primary encryption patent number 8,472,639 was currently listed exclusively under my name. He demanded to know if a systemic filing error had occurred within the patent portal. I informed General Lawson that the public registration was fully accurate and legally binding under federal law. I explained that following my sudden, involuntary termination without cause by Amber Holloway, the automatic reversion clause embedded within our original 2008 contract had executed, returning complete ownership of the encryption core to me. I added that TechFlow currently possessed zero legal rights to execute, deploy, or demonstrate the software architecture. General Lawson went completely silent on the line for several long seconds. He did not raise his voice or offer hollow corporate apologies. He was a seasoned military commander who recognized an immediate operational disaster. He thanked me for the direct information and hung up the phone. Within 45 minutes, General Lawson landed at the local airport aboard a private aircraft and arrived at TechFlow headquarters without warning. Witnesses later described his arrival as an absolute storm for upper management. He marched directly into the corporate legal department, demanded the original patent assignment archives, and verified that no corporate transfer had ever been completed. He then walked straight into Amber Holloway's corner office and closed the door. The loud, furious exchange that followed was clearly audible throughout the entire executive wing. Despite General Lawson's intense confrontation with management, the scheduled Pentagon demonstration at the downtown convention center was already underway. Over 200 senior military officials, defense industry representatives, and procurement directors filled the main auditorium. Massive high-definition screens projected TechFlow's corporate logo alongside prominent slogans declaring proprietary cryptographic superiority. Amber Holloway walked onto the central stage wearing a tailored navy blazer, radiating complete corporate confidence. She opened her keynote address, describing the software platform as an unprecedented technological breakthrough developed exclusively by TechFlow's internal research teams. She signaled her technical operators to initiate the live demonstration sequence, displaying real-time secure communication channels across the auditorium screens. At that exact instant, Colonel Edward Ross, Chief Procurement Officer for the Department of Defense, stood up from his seat in the front row, carrying a stack of fresh paper documents. He called out across the auditorium, asking Amber to immediately clarify the legal ownership of the core algorithm being demonstrated. Amber attempted to dismiss the interruption with smooth corporate talking points, but Colonel Ross walked directly up to the stage podium and handed her a printed copy of the Public Patent Registry abstract. He announced to the entire auditorium that the United States Patent and Trademark Office registered Richard Miller as the sole individual owner of the underlying technology under patent number 8,472,639. Colonel Ross stated firmly that demonstrating unlicensed defense software violated federal procurement standards and Section 271 regulations, rendering any prospective military contracts legally void. The auditorium erupted into immediate noise as military representatives began shutting down their notebooks and collecting their briefcases. Corporate legal staff rushed onto the stage to cut the microphone audio, but the public exposure was total. The high-stakes demonstration collapsed in full view of TechFlow's primary client base. I woke up on Thursday morning to total stillness inside my suburban home. Major was resting peacefully on his thick rug near the study window, bathed in morning sunlight. When I activated my workstation's display, the screen displayed 203 missed calls, dozens of urgent voicemail transcriptions, and frantic email messages from members of TechFlow's board of directors. At 8 o'clock sharp, General Bradley Lawson called my direct line. His voice sounded heavily fatigued, but completely steady and resolute. He asked me to state my explicit conditions for resolving the legal freeze and restoring TechFlow's operational compliance. I responded by transmitting my finalized commercial licensing agreement directly to his secure email. The document set forth 5 non-negotiable requirements: a $15 million upfront retrospective licensing fee, an ongoing 12% gross revenue royalty on all active defense deployments, an immediate voting seat on TechFlow's board of directors as chief technology advisor, full public attribution of original patent authorship across all corporate literature, and the immediate termination of Amber Holloway for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. General Lawson presented the agreement to the board of directors during an emergency executive session convened at 9 in the morning. With their primary defense contracts facing immediate federal cancellation and massive patent infringement litigation looming, the board voted unanimously to accept every single condition, without modification, within 4 hours. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, formal execution paperwork arrived at my residence via bonded legal courier. I executed the licensing agreements alongside Walter Finch, officially restoring TechFlow's commercial right to utilize the encryption core under strict, high-yield licensing terms. Immediately following the conclusion of the board session, Amber Holloway was formally stripped of her executive title and authority. Security personnel escorted her through the front lobby as she carried her personal belongings inside a single cardboard box. She had received a severe irreversible lesson regarding the fatal error of discarding foundational technical expertise in pursuit of superficial corporate maneuvering. On the following Monday morning, I returned to TechFlow Dynamics headquarters. I did not enter the building as a vulnerable employee subject to executive arrogance, but as a principal patent holder and influential member of the board of directors. As I walked across the main engineering floor, my former team member stood up and greeted me with genuine professional respect. We convened an immediate technical assembly to reorganize our software development protocols, ensuring that our dedicated engineering staff received appropriate financial compensation, intellectual credit, and structural support. Real leadership does not depend on hollow corporate slogans or ruthless cost-cutting measures. It relies on technical mastery, legal foresight, and uncompromising respect for the individuals who build the foundation. Sitting in the executive boardroom looking out over the city skyline, I knew that structural balance and justice had been permanently restored.